John, can you hear us okay? Just testing.
I certainly can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I can see you too. The owl sees you.
The owl sees all.
The owl flew to coop and came back, huh?
That's the owl.
All right. 3 people entered the waiting room.
Oh.
My packet to load. Should have done that. So we are at a quorum. It is 4:30. I will call us to order. I do think OB is planning on joining.
He's joining.
Oh, good. Okay. And then. Oh, he joins a little bit late. Can you guys hear us okay on the online? Good, awesome. Okay, so calling us to order, we will begin with citizens to be heard. It looks like we have at least one person here to speak. Seth, hi. I'm going to invite you to come off of mute and state your full name, and then you're welcome to make your comments.
Hi, everybody. My name is Seth Davis. I am the operations director at ORS here in Moab. For those of you who aren't familiar with ORS, we've been in business here since '97, but we're not downtown mainstream doing the daily business. So it's possible you may not have heard of us, but we're housed down kind of close to the Spanish Trail Shell. And I'm here today just to pass on thoughts on employee housing. Obviously, we have a need like so many others in this town and industry. And some main things that I just kind of want to pass on is our needs are all over the place because we have people who live here in town and have their own housing. We have people who might show up for one trip each year. We have people who might show up for just the season but don't live in Moab year round, and all across the board. So we have this just crazy need for folks to kind of back up to describe what we do. We are largely, as I said, we're not downtown doing the kind of daily business. So we do multi-day rafting trips, anywhere from 2 days to where we have a 23-day trip going out soon. So kind of all over the need. So our housing is interesting. Some folks need a place to stay throughout the season. Some folks you can be on the water for 23 days straight, so they don't need housing while they're out there. And then we have just a wide array of employees that work here to be able to do what we do as a business. We have folks that are full-time, so to speak, and that means they're kind of here from March through October. Then obviously we shut down in the off season as a river company, and then we have folks that work part-time. I kind of touched on that. So and we need just this wide array of people to be able to run our trips, because it's not a regularly scheduled thing where every week our staffing needs are different. And so some people, like I've said, come in for different trips. And so I think some things I just wanted to try to get across is our needs are simple and also variable. We're a bunch of raft guides and we don't need anything too crazy. A place to sleep is important, obviously, and then obviously restroom facilities and just a common area that's climate controlled. So our needs are pretty simple, and a lot of times when guides are working, they just need a place to sleep for a couple nights, and that's it. And I'm trying to think of anything else. Obviously, for ORS and other companies, there's also limitations on what we can put in for employee housing, depending on the property that's owned and that kind of thing. So the cost of infrastructure could be, very prohibitive. The seasonality of our business, where 6 months out of the year we're not running trips generating income, that presents its challenges. And then there's just administrative demands as well, going through permitting and plans and that kind of stuff. So those are the main things I kind of wanted to pass on. Does anybody have any questions about what I've said, what we need, that kind of stuff?
So just to play back some things I heard, it sounds like you've got people that need more reliable housing, and then you also mentioned that you've got guys who just sort of drop in for a trip or two, you mentioned. So did I capture that correctly?
Yeah, exactly. Our needs are all over the place. We need people, and something I forgot to mention is we also have drivers, and historically we've had folks that are semi-retired or retired who are already established here, but more and more we're finding that we do need drivers who are here seasonally, but then they need consistent housing. So yeah, our needs are all over the place. Some people need a consistent place to stay night after night. Some people need a place to stay just for a couple days. So did that answer your question, Emily?
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else have any questions? This is interesting.
I guess I'd be intrigued to know if you guys have done any like brainstorming amongst your staff on like ways that could be solved by kind of what we're discussing or otherwise.
And sorry, I missed the first part. If we've done any what kind of things?
Oh, just brainstorm. Like if you guys have amongst yourselves at ORS, done any brainstorming of possible solutions or ideas that, maybe they're aligned with what we've been discussing, or maybe there's something we haven't thought of.
Yeah, I think some solutions, again, is simple solutions because we don't need too much. So, there's folks who have little trailers or vans, and the ability for them to be able to park and stay out of those, that can go a long ways. Maintaining, a domicile, for lack of a better word, is pretty challenging for us both in terms of how much space we have and the fact that it's seasonal. In the winter, we don't need. That's another big piece of this. In the winter, we don't need housing for employees. Folks that live here year round already have that secured. Folks who don't, they're off doing the variable things they do in the off season. So I think that for the brainstorming, what we need are just some relatively simple provisions that allow people to utilize the resources they have, or simple things that we can factor in to give them a place to sleep and hang out. I don't know if that answered your question or not. But.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us, Seth. We appreciate your comments today, and we hope you'll stay engaged on this issue as a manager of a local outfitter. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Emily?
Feel free.
Whoops,
Yeah,
could I ask Seth a quick question? So I'm trying to, I won't brainstorm a long time, but if you had a couple of trailers, and I don't know ORS in terms of its site on site, that you could use to have somebody stay for a couple of days, somebody else might stay, longer, but you wouldn't really be able to have somebody come in for at least 30 days or something like that. Would that do for you?
Yeah, and we actually have, we went through the process. We have the ability to have 5 like RVs or trailers on site. And so we do have that, and that is helpful to a certain extent, but when it comes to 5 units allowed. So another thing that I didn't convey earlier, sometimes we need a place for 20, 24 people to sleep overnight. Some days it's 2. And so by being limited to 5 trailers or something like that, that can work out sometimes, and sometimes it's not even close to enough. So
I just have one question to throw out there as something we've talked about, is that I just want to get your opinion on whether or not, as a business owner, you would be interested in something like a cooperative type of arrangement with other businesses, and kind of going in on some kind of a property that could be developed where just for the basic minimum needs for people to park and come in for your seasonal workers, if that would be something of interest to you, or if you wouldn't even at all.
I think, well, first I have to clarify, I am not the business owner, so I can't answer for what the owners would want. I think that they would be interested in hearing about those options. I don't know, from a cost standpoint, that's the thing, there's, as a seasonal business, all these little things add up, and that depending on what that looks like, maybe, but maybe that would just be too cost prohibitive as well. We're trying hard to pay folks, the best wages we can and stuff like that. So there's especially as a seasonal business, it's hard to fulfill some of these other costs. So, but
Okay, thanks.
thank you. Thanks everybody for your time.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. And it looks like we have one other person here to maybe make a comment. Crystal, did you want to listen in or did you want to make a comment?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm mostly just listening. I'm great to see the discussion and the brainstorming, and yeah, I just hope we can get some great ideas going. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. All right, so it looks like that's it for folks who are on for citizens to be heard. So we'll go ahead and move on to ex parte communications and disclosures. We don't have any public hearings on the agenda today. So I don't think that would be relevant unless anybody has anything they particularly want to share. All right, so we'll look at our meeting minutes from May 9th. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? Are there any edits or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the minutes.
I move that we adopt the minutes.
Okay.
I'll second.
Oh, thank you, reverse. All right, Makeda was on it. Motion by OB, second by Makeda. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous, wonderful. And we'll, you know what? I think actually, if you're okay, I'd love to go into the vacancy first. And that way our applicant who's here has a chance to be with us and then can continue with his evening. Perfect. Well, we'll go ahead. I'm just going to flip those around. So we do have an application in for our planning commission vacancy. This is the seat that was previously held by Josie, who's now a member of our county commission. And this seat is active through 2024. So it would be for that full period. And generally in our bylaws, we have set out for ourselves that we ask you questions, we all have a chance to interview, but since we have only one applicant, we also in the past have voted to suspend the rules and move forward with a recommendation to approve to the county commission. So I'm open to a motion, otherwise we'll move forward with an interview. Okay, so we want to talk to the applicant. All right.
Let's grill him.
Let's grill them. So just so you know, the way that this generally works is each of us will ask you a question, just give you a chance to respond. You don't need to go into any great depth, but we'd love to start by actually just letting you have a chance to introduce yourself. And I think, actually, would you mind coming up here to the hot seat just for the owl and the video and everything? Are you joining us? Thanks, Erin. Okay. So just give you, a minute or so, however long you need to introduce yourself and your interest in being on the planning commission.
All right. Well, my name's Aaron Lindbergh. I started working at Moab around 2007. I live over in Mountain View. I've worked in the county with trail mix for like a couple years on the trail mix thing. So I kind of somewhat know how like county boards and stuff work. And I just see that, one of the I see the planning commission has a lot of like input with how this area develops. And I think it's kind of an important spot. And I feel like my voice would probably be a good one to be heard in there because, I'm just kind of like a working class homeowner, but I also, I know like the struggle, like I have 4 renters living in my house. I know the struggle with like the employee housing, which we were just talking about. And I also work as a plumber. That's actually how I met Emily. And so I'm kind of like in there on the building side of things as well. So that's my piece.
All So what we'll do is we'll do round robin, and I'm actually going to start with OB and Tony online, shake things up a bit. I know sort of puts all of us on the spot, but this is just your opportunity to ask the applicant questions that you think would be pertinent to your recommendation to the county commission. So OB, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I guess I'll take a shot. So the planning commission, the county commission, sometimes tell people what they can and can't do with their property, although their property is owned by them as private property. Can you tell me what you think about that and kind of how you would kind of cut the line about which side you might come down to, let's say, on a development that would be good for the developer, but might have some downsides for the community?
Yeah, that's the main, one of the issues I've been following you guys with the paper with. I definitely am like, there's a lot of people making a lot of money off of development here. And I think that they need to really consider, the impacts. Like, we're in America, we respect private property rights, but I think there needs to be on the other side of that a balance of, an idea of the general good, and those have to be weighed between the two of those things. Like, I see a lot of times you guys are like allowing, more units in a development if it's workforce housing. I kind of am on board with those kind of ideas on that. Like how to play ball with the powers that be. So I think that, on a personally, I view it like, as a government has a lot of, the power of the government has to be mediating this large, what am I trying to say? Money has so much power. And I think it really, that's the unspoken person who votes in any city or county council. And that has to be watched carefully and, respected as well.
Thank you.
Tony?
Thanks, Emily. Just to be clear, we're just kind of spitballing questions. I haven't received a standardized set of questions, correct?
We don't have a standardized set, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you are welcome.
I've got one. Surprise. Well, thank you for joining us and volunteering. I appreciate you coming out. I was curious regarding your experience in trail mix. I don't actually have a ton of personal experience in trail type activities. It's not something I do. I don't really ride mountain bikes or hike that much. I'm a fan of the gravity assisted sports. But I've been wondering, in that context with your personal experience, how you feel about public lands, publicly owned lands, state, county, or federal public land being outsourced, or the management thereof being outsourced to what they call the private recreation contractors. There's Utah Outdoor Recreation and Rocky Mountain Recreation. These are firms that will come in and run an access site or a campground for profit and have a contract with a land agency. I don't know if you've ever run into public lands where they are managed in such a way, or if that's on your radar or not, but just a couple of ideas on how you feel about that.
Yeah, I guess personally, I'm not a big fan of privatization of public goods like that. I see it as somebody's probably making a lot of money. On trail mix, I never ran into that. It was we were mostly grant based until we moved our employees over into the county. We never dealt with anything like that.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. We can keep it quick.
Steve?
What do you think are the most prominent planning and development issues in Grand County right now?
Well, I think the thing, if you go to any social gathering in Moab right now, it's like the cost of housing and employee housing, like, and I kind of, I've kept a pulse on what you guys are doing. I see you guys in the paper, it's like you're working with developers. I think that's a big one. And then I just think, I just refinanced my house and my mind was blown on the idea of that. I think though, like that has major implications for the future and character of our town. So I think that's kind of the things I see going on. Mhm.
So I'm missing my hand-fed questions, but.
If you'd like to pass
So
it.
my question is more of an opinion than it is a qualification, I guess. So working with all the contractors and working as a plumber and stuff, what is the reputation of the planning commission vis-a-vis the county council in the development end of the world out there?
Yeah, so to be fair, I'm mostly a service plumber and like I deal with Cole and those guys like a little bit. I've done, I'll go out for a
So
couple
you're a
inspections.
repair guy instead of a new
Yeah, but I'll do
construction?
new construction as well. Whenever they do something, the guys, there's of course the grumbling like, oh, we got to do this dark sky lighting, but it happens, it gets done, and like, there's a lot of, I think with what I see with the contractors, there's just so much work. So, they're billing whatever they take, like, if that regulation is there, adds to the bill. So I don't see necessarily like regulation is like necessarily like, oh my God, this is gonna break this project. It's like, oh man, these customers are gonna pay. So,
That's a good question, though.
Yeah, it is.
That's a really good question.
mhm.
Yeah, I did not prepare, so I just looked up the question you've asked in the past, but I guess I'm curious, our advisory body to the county council, we don't actually, approve or deny anything, we just pass on recommendations. I'm just curious what that would like mean to you in the context of broader long-term planning goals and efforts.
I guess no.
Okay, for the Urban Advisory Board, what does that mean to you in the context of like the broader planning efforts that are being made?
Well, I'm guessing that the county council doesn't have time to like fine tooth comb over everything. So like, we're kind of like an expediter of ideas.
Mhm.
Is that what's kind of going on? That's what I see it.
Actually, really like that framing.
Yeah, I like
that too.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that one. before.
Yeah. So I'm the county
Yeah.
commissioner liaison, and I think the planning commission has a huge amount of weight as far as county commission decisions. Both the planning commission and the county attorney. I think we take that into great account.
Mhm.
So I think you guys have, to me, a lot of power within the county as far as where development is going.
Mhm.
That's my opinion.
So I'll close this off with a bit of a zinger. So one of the issues that we have been weighing more frequently is the balance between density and density bonuses, which can add more housing to meet the needs you already addressed, and the rural character and lifestyle of our community, which is largely enjoyed by people who have already been able to purchase a home, but it's very important to them and part of the reason why they chose to move and buy what they did. How do you feel about balancing those? What would you take into consideration if you had to look at an issue that weighed the two?
Oh, yeah. The old, people think that when they moved to Moab was the best time ever. And so this place is changing. And, Utah is like, people don't realize Utah is one of the most urban states in the country other than Hawaii. And it's like, we live like this is like, we're an island of federal land with a denser population. you know, if people want to have hay fields and stuff, I guess, you know, that becomes more a plaything of the like wealthy people. And I think like, I guess if you want that, like, yeah, and this one's tough because I would love to see like pasture lands and stuff, but like, is that a reality, you know, and like somebody's looking at making $1,000 off of hay or like $10 million off of a development. And then it's like, there's all this like demand from housing. Like, how do you balance all that? You know, it would be, I guess I don't have a direct answer for that, but I'm also like, I'm not like, oh, pro-development, but I'm not like, like, I understand that viewpoint. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much. If there are no further questions for Aaron, then we'll go ahead and take a vote to move a favorable recommendation forward for Aaron to be appointed to the county commission, and then the county commission will weigh it at their next meeting, I believe. So is there a motion on the table to send a favorable recommendation to appoint Aaron, what's your last name? Lindbergh, thank you so much, to the open planning commission seat through the term of 2024.
I'll move to recommend.
Okay, second?
Second.
Second. All right, motion by Tony, second by Steve. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Well, we're gonna go meet the county commission in a week, so thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome to keep your company up here, or you're welcome to go back to your seat. And we'll go ahead and move forward. Lovely. Okay, so now we'll move on to our county commission update. Trish.
Okay, so I just have a couple of things from the last meeting. Emory Telecom came to do a quick little presentation, and basically they're providing fiber. Maybe somebody can explain to me what that means, but throughout the valley within the next 5 years.
Faster.
Faster.
Fiber optic cable.
Right, no, and yeah, that's kind of what my assumption was.
We're all
But
getting
anyway,
new dresses.
That's all I know.
Trish.
That's right. Next 5 years, they'll have the whole valley covered in Castle Valley and Thompson. Les Bloomberg came to do a presentation on the the science of sound. I had it backward. And so that is, you know, on the recording, if you want to watch that. It was pretty interesting. It was probably about 15 minutes or so. So it just related to how sound travels within our valley, how we try to qualify and quantify that. So anyways, it was an interesting presentation. The Pat Creek Stream Gauge has been fully funded, so that's great. And I think I've already talked about the importance of that stream gauge. And it was a lot of different entities that came together to fund that, but the county will pay for the maintenance and operation into the future. On your guys's docket was the approval of the final plat on Plateau Circle. So that was a 1.15 acre lot that was split into two at 0.56 acres and 0.58 acres. That was a guy that I know that's a local worker, so I was psyched about that because my assumption is he'll probably provide that for somebody else. And then the approval of the final plat for Royal Crossing, it was phase 1, track 2, where they're taking 0.34 acres and dividing it into 0.09 acres for dwellings, which are 2 townhomes. So more housing for our workforce.
Yep. It's so exciting to see the houses
It's
go
so
up.
Oh my gosh.
Every time I drive into town, it feels like there's
They're also
more.
It's
adorable too.
I
Yeah.
know, it's really fun.
Yeah, they're on their way for submitting more, those tracks or.
Yeah, I think
Doing a
it's
lot
got
of
to be,
community legal tests.
yeah,
Which I think it's like the energy efficiency and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like,
Great.
that's
Yeah.
a key thing.
I know I ran into Audrey Graham the other day and she's like, just thank you so much for funding Caitlin's position. It has to just be a huge load off of that, you know, volunteers trying to pull that off was a big deal. So,
Well, I have 2 short anecdotes on the
Great.
noise issue. So first I got a new little iWatch because I had to get a new Verizon phone, and I was sitting and eating outside at one of the restaurants in town, and they have a decibel alert, and it was going off on my wrist as I'm sitting eating dinner. So that happened, yeah.
Oh,
That's crazy.
And the other thing is, I took my kids up Hidden Valley, and it was the first time that they got to the top of the rocks. And I was telling them, oh, it's so peaceful and quiet. And my 9-year-old goes, what are you talking about? You can hear all the cars. And it was a windy day, and I guess I hadn't really tuned in. If anybody wants to understand why sound travels in our valley the way that it does, they should climb up Hidden Valley and hear it echo off those rocks. Because you really, you know, when it,
Right,
when a like a J break goes off or something out there,
right,
and it, you
right.
really understand it.
And I think from up there, you can also hear King Creek. To me, I think
Oh,
you're
sure.
pulling in that, that's what I hear when I'm up there also, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great.
That's it.
Any questions for Trish?
Oh, the general plan was adopted.
Yes, I did.
Oh,
I know.
Oh,
I didn't- I was gonna skip that and leave that to you because I don't even know.
It was not it was kind of a anticlimactic in a way, like.
That's good. That means we work closely with the
Yeah.
county commission, that staff was extra
Right.
engaged to keep
There
everybody.
was no
involved.
public
That's good.
comment or anything.
Oh,
so
yeah.
it just kind of, well, I mean, there were comments that came in, but via email that John kind of kept track of and
Yeah.
is addressing, but nobody really spoke up at the meeting or anything, so, yeah. it was pretty smooth.
Very
It
exciting.
has been smooth.
Do you know the location of the gauge for Back Creek?
Yes, it's right on the bridge that goes into Pat Creek. Into
Okay.
the community, yeah.
Gotcha.
And they put it on there for a while after, during the flooding, after the fires. And so it was great because it actually has a kind of an alert that you can get an app on your phone and it'll, if that's
It's coming.
flooding, it's coming. So like, you know, Gary Wilson that lives, anyways, he was like, it was a big deal because it flooded all of his horse corrals and all that. So he was like, oh, it was a really big deal to have that, you know, it said it's 45 minutes or out or whatever. It
Yeah.
was able to give that kind of data. So that's pretty
I
cool.
screenshot the second one that I got on my phone
Okay.
because it was so amazing. to
That's
have that alert.
cool. Yeah, so it has that, but it also just has, you know, it's like right now, Pat Creek is flowing and this idea that most of Pat Creek goes into the aquifer, right? But when it flows, well, anyways, we could get into that later,
Mhm.
but this idea that it'd be good to know that amount because it's feasible that we could do, and Mark would really need to talk to this, like a change application of our Colorado river rights to be able to capture that water when it's, does that make sense? Some sense, to trade it out, right? So if we had some general sense of how much water is going into the Colorado, we could capture it. And you do that by putting it into a gravel pit and assume that it's recharging the aquifer. And there's quite a few gravel pits out there that are defunct, right? That we could do that. So it's kind of an interesting idea. Cedar City's doing it right now to mitigate their over it, you know, they've over allotted their water by a lot. So they're capturing any water they can. So anyways, interesting.
Exciting. Yeah, cool. Any other questions for Trish? All right, we'll move on. Okay, so speaking of general plan, the Oio Policy Statement, I just want to give a little bit of context for why that's in our packet. We had I'm in so many steering committees and stuff these days, I'm always mixing them up, but we had a steering committee meeting with Bill,
This
the
land use code.
land
stuff,
use code, yeah.
like future land use.
And the high level of this meeting was to just begin to talk through some more specifics about land use policies that would then guide any suggestions on land use code updates in addition to what the planning and zoning department has been leading. And it also summarized the findings of all of his work with remember the spider charts and looking at the different models for development. So it was a great meeting. Bill did a fabulous job. But the only thing that I particularly caught on to is there was a soft recommendation to get rid of our overlays in the county and instead look at actually defining our underlying zones and making sure that our underlying zones are distinct and diverse enough to capture the different uses. But included in that was a possible direction. Remember, just from a consultant, this is, you know, early phases, that overnight accommodation should be a use right by right in highway commercial. And I pointed out that historically that was the case. And actually the reason the county commission moved in the direction they did is because We saw two things happening. We saw residential acreage, especially in those split zones, be upzoned to highway commercial, or adjacent lots that were residential be upzoned to highway commercial, to make use for, you know, that higher economic value use. And we also saw a usage of that area that crowded out any sort of commercial or, you know, use that focused on our residents. And then in that period, we've seen a lot of those, you know, big box hotels and large condo developments go up in that district. So when I brought this up, a lot of that context was missing from people who were in the call, who maybe just weren't in town when that happened, or as consultants. And so Elisa and John asked me to just draft a policy statement. I want to emphasize the capital D in the word draft. This is not intended to be my assertion. This is literally me taking a stab at it between meetings at work to try and capture this so it can be implemented into or introduced into the general plan for future reference. So with all that context, I actually would love, we can do one of two things. Either we could have a quick discussion and sort of rip this apart, or if there's interest in actually editing this together and then coming back to it at our next meeting, I'm sort of indifferent. But I would love to get one suggestion or the other and then move forward. If we do adopt it tonight, it doesn't have to be formal, and then it would be brought to the county commission for formal adoption. I already noticed a typo when I say high commercial instead of highway commercial at the bottom of the first paragraph. I think things like that, the planning and zoning staff can address. But is there anything that seems either factually incorrect or misstated? Anything that's missing? Anything that you would remove? And OB, it looks like you're off mute, so I'll just hand it over to you.
Well, only this, and I think that I heard at one time, and I think I used the argument, I did mention this to you in an email today. I believe that when highway commercial was formed, it didn't allow hotels. It may not have allowed overnight, but I think it didn't allow hotels. And as I recall, but this is vague, it was because people didn't like the hotels being basically built in residential areas. They wanted to get it away from residential areas. So that if that's true, it's a nice, interesting historical thing that says it wasn't always the case. You could build hotels. It might have been overnight rentals, but we'll say hotels at least in the highway commercial. It's something they switched over, and now the county has switched back. And I'm sure somebody on staff could probably go back and check, you know, was 20 years ago, did highway commercial or when highway commercial first started, and they basically said so many feet to each side of 191, whether it actually had a by right to do hotels. I'd be happy to have this edited either way. Maybe John knows.
Well, can I say something about that, Emily, if you don't mind? Yeah, I think just to make sure we have context here, that this is really policy level. So we're talking about the general plan, not the land use code. Nothing really, in many ways, the land use code is an implementation tool, is a regulatory tool, as you probably know. So there's a bright line separation between policy and regulation, because regulation is entitlement. So one of the important things about this for process is that this will get public feedback anyway through the land use. There's no rush. Big rush, let me say it that way, because in June we'll be doing public outreach again, and there will be some what would you call land use descriptions, which was Bill working on right now. There will be locations of where those land use areas are. In land use, these are fuzzy lines, they're not parcel lines like a land use code would be. So that we're really talking on a high level. It's hopefully going to resolve a lot of the split zones, but that doesn't happen at the policy level. That happens at the land use code level, as you probably know. So I'm probably saying some things you already know. So I guess to summarize, I think the process for the planning commission would be good to have you weigh in on this, but there's time. And getting that feedback back through Bill and through the planning and zoning staff will help us clarify. So the background statement's good. We can explore that more, Bob. And then the question is, what are the values? And what are those values as we start moving forward? So we can help draft the values, but I think it'd be helpful if the commission, not right now necessarily, could give us some good value statements around what an OAO implementation could look like in from a value point of view, if that helps.
So first, Bob, just adding some extra color to your comments, which was really interesting, and I think it'd be great to have staff look into that. When we were looking at the small area plan at 313 and 191, we referenced a north corridor small area plan that predated that by some time, and that was when the resort special district was defined. And I just would be curious if that also aligned to what you're referencing, and because it does, there has been from previous commissions or councils interest in sort of having designated areas for those particular uses. And John, back to your point, even this is probably more specific than it needs to be, but I think the big thing is that the commission removed overnight accommodations as a use by right in any underlying zone, and let's capture why. So it sounds like as far as going forward, I'm glad we had this just so everyone can have context for this. And if there's any additional comments, I'll leave space for them. But why don't we maybe start a Google Doc where we can work on this, come up with some values, brainstorm some value statements, and then return to it at a future meeting. But I don't want to shut down any conversation if anybody else had anything that, yeah, Rick?
So this is kind of off the topic because it's not around the regulations, but I asked about this a few months ago. So is there any way is there still a bunch of things in the pipeline that are already approved that these things keep showing up? And you've got them in zones and stuff like that. But when you look at all this stuff, it looks blank, and all of a sudden there's things there. So isn't there some way where we can see all this stuff that's already been approved? Like,
Yes.
I know there's hotels on the horizon out there that I don't think anybody knows about.
Right.
I think they're in the pipeline. They're probably falling in some of these places. And as you're discussing overnight accommodation clusters, there might be already something giant size sitting there that you don't know about.
Right.
So
yeah, I know I was searching for some of that stuff in our Z drive and kind of getting close to finding what I think might be an ultimate list of what did get approved back in the day.
Going with that, is there, once these things get approved, is that like forever? Is there a timeline? Is there a clock? Do they get to start over after 3 years? They get to start over after 9 months?
Right.
What happens?
I want to say that we don't have a time expiration for site plan, like once they're approved for commercial use, like a hotel. But we do have that for final plat and preliminary to final
But if
plat.
you have this map thing, and then you could put a date on that thing.
Right.
Yeah.
that would be
And
You mean a date when
when their time's up.
I think
Or
Kevin
even
might
just
have
having a map
something
of
like that.
Yeah, Kevin
They
would probably
did.
have some of it.
They did make them. I remember being really involved in that and not necessarily planning it, but just following it really closely. And there was a list
Mhm.
with a number of how many units,
Yeah.
where they were going, what they were.
And I don't know.
And I don't know if it
What
was,
is it?
but I don't know if it was just city specific. Because I remember seeing it from the city. I don't remember if it was both or if it was just the city.
It'd be interesting to see both together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd really
Yeah.
be interesting.
But on a
So-
map too, when you
On
look
a
at a
map,
list, you're like, okay,
Yeah.
well, but
Yeah.
Let's see if Kevin has that, Commissioner Walker, because he's the GIS expert. And we had a AmeriCorps Vista volunteer named JD in the office for some time who also did a lot of that mapping work, and he may have done something like that. But I think that's a great call out.
Are you gonna ask him about that, or do you want me to ask him about that?
If you would like to ask Kevin, and then I'll do my side of it and keep looking and digging around what we might have on file. And then if he doesn't have a map, but we just have a list, I could create a map.
Okay, great.
From that.
also I know we're kind of getting into the weeds. But what's the practicality of applying some kind of deadline to like steps of the process?
I don't think we would be able to apply a deadline now that they're already in the.
No, I mean for
process.
future ones.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that could be a code update.
That
I
would
mean,
be-
it should
I'd
be
be really
really, I
interested
would
in seeing
think
that
that there would
because-
be some kind of a deadline.
like the lines back there approved, what, like 15 years ahead of time, and nothing happened. And then when they came back and decided to start, everyone was like, wait, what? So I think that'd be really valuable. I think it really,
Right.
I think the community would really appreciate that.
I'm
so.
honestly surprised that that's not the case. We should
Yeah.
ask the county attorney if there are any state stipulations that
Right,
prevent us
there
from
might
doing
be
that.
So I know this, I think the city, when all the line spec stuff was going on, revisited that policy, but I don't know what happened with it, so.
It's a great future consideration. I love it.
Thanks for that.
What would you
That's a
think,
really great
Steve,
idea.
like
That's a
from your
great
background, and I know you're not maybe so involved in commercial type development, but what, would that be a reasonable thing that, to have like a deadline for if somebody got site plan approval, maybe 2 years to build it out, or before it's like,
Yeah,
does that seem like?
and we
reasonable?
operated with a bunch of that for
Uh-huh.
the Murphy Flats project.
Yeah, for sure you did with Martin Flats. Yeah, I know we have it for subdivisions, but I'm not sure about commercial.
Yeah, I have no idea
Hotel
about commercial, but
Yeah,
I mean,
Like they also have an easier time getting all that together, with big or so.
you're just, I think, I just foresee you just running into the issue of use by right, and when can you, like, when does it infringe on that right?
well,
And I-
the
and I
use is
understand,
there, the use by right is there, but the site plan approval may expire. at a
Right.
certain time
So they would-
based on like,
At which point you would just reapply,
right.
correct?
And I'd love to hear like a more of a commercial developer's standpoint on that, just their perspective, because I don't really know. I mean,
Right, what issues might arise
it-
for them that they would have to wait for so long?
I see it beneficial to the community for planning, though, is it just an inevitable delay? Because, okay, now you gotta scrap that site plan, okay, we're gonna go back and do the same thing, and you can't legally deny it for whatever reason.
True, but you
Then-
could have different requirements based on whatever else might be, have developed in the meantime
Yeah, that's a good
around
point.
that area, like.
And for certain size developments, we might even be able to look at it in terms of breaking things up into phasing and requiring that certain phasing be completed, so you don't end up with, like that development on the left side of the road where you're driving into Junction that got abandoned in 2008 and,
Yeah.
Talk about spot zoning.
Yeah.
And
Right.
this would help at least eliminate or recognizing or
Right.
way.
I think that's a
Yeah.
great idea. Great
Do you,
point.
do you want me to ask Chrissy about that?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any further discussion? Otherwise, we'll move on.
I was just gonna emphasize that having a sunset or you must implement this by is a pretty common thing in other types of like non-residential and municipal zoning land use things. If you've got an ADP to go spud a well somewhere, you're gonna have to drill that well and start producing by a certain time, or else you lose those rights. It's pretty typical to expect people to like follow through on whatever timeline is appropriate, but that's a pretty common clause in contracts and leases.
That's a great point as well. To be able to point to those sort of metaphorical cases, so, or analogous cases, I should say. Wonderful. Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on to the Unified Transportation Master Plan, which is very exciting to see. So pull up my
Want me to start, Emily?
Please do, John. I'm making my way through my digital packet. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, before I speak, I have something to say. I just thought we'd say the implementation strategy, because it's not on the agenda tonight, for the general plan is to move ahead with a workshop. I know you guys love workshops, so, and there'll be cookies and food. Sometime in June with the Planning Commission. We're hoping to have a workshop with department heads before that and some of their recommendations coming back. So it's taking a look at all the elements and over 200 work programs in the general plan and trying to prioritize those in various ways: staff, resources, costs, and timetable. So that's coming up. We're hoping in June. It might be a bit compressed to try to get all of that together and then recommendations back to the county commission. But the goal is to try to get an implementation plan together. One of the elements that's going on right now is our land use study, which the commission is talking about, and the transportation one, which is the one that's before you now. That timetable is in your package and it's on the screen. Wow. So the public, and I won't go over all the dates here, but the goal is to get the adoption of the transportation master plan in the first week in August. And this is working together with the city, bear that in mind. And it's been going very well, I think. There's a list of projects there. We don't have to go over those tonight, but it's really important, I think, that the commission weigh in on either individually or corporately on that list. There's a prioritization process there. There's costs assigned. A couple of outcomes. One of them is the Transportation Master Plan, when adopted, will update the whole transportation section in the general plan, including not just the transportation section, but other areas as well, trails, impacts, environment. Usually it impacts a lot of things, economic and social too. So that'll be an important next step after this is formally adopted by both the commission and the county commission, both commissions. So that's coming. And so that project list also, the other outcome of it is it actually becomes the backbone of a capital improvement plan, which is very fundamental for the roads department and for funding impact fees. And as you probably know, impact fees for roads are usually the highest. They're higher than sewer, they're higher than water, because they tend to be the most demanding area to invest in for subdivision. So that part of it is going to be hopefully addressed as we move ahead with the administration evaluation of impact fees too. So the project list is really crucial to that. It's got 3 or 4 major parts to it. And those are kind of discussed, I guess, in the beginning, but I just put it in the staff report that there's roads, parking, and active transportation list of projects, pages 85 to 94. Improvement strategies, which is more of a policy statement in areas about, and the strategies and plans are there too. And then the project prioritization is there. So just to get the scope narrowed down, for example, we did not include in the master plan Highway 191. It might sound like a bit of an oversight, but because UDOT's managing that, we kept this kind of narrower, and therefore the consulting fees are less. But it still implicates any work on 191. And one of the examples is the frontage roads that are being planned for UDOT, which is on their project list. That's an important reference point for good building orientation design, multimodal transportation. What you don't want is a sea of parking there, at least from a planning perspective. I know there's a tension between mobility and good kind of building orientation, and that's a natural tension that exists. There's a couple of other roads that connections. The connection to the university is a big one. Connection to Spanish Valley, across the Spanish Valley Drive, the boat ramp, the Bar M trails, and what's the name of that on the other side there? Anyway, and then the 313 connection, some of the highway connections as well. So those are important. So here's an example of one thing that's left off on the project list is DXL lanes and Excel lanes at the airport, because that's all 191. There's really no highway road connection. That's a county road that comes in there. So this will be an important step for us to get the projects updated from the last Spanish Valley master plan and moving ahead with implementation. So we thought we'd try to get to the planning commission first rather than second, because usually we go to the county commission and then come back, which is backwards. So we wanted to make sure this was before you. You've got some time, as you can see from the dates, to respond, and we just thought we'd present it. So prepared to answer or address any questions you might have.
So as far as any discussion tonight, I'd love to start by first discussing the adoption timetable and public hearing events and so on. If there's any clarifying comments or suggestions. And then if there's any suggestions related to the draft itself or the project list, maybe we'll just round robin. And if you want to weigh in, that's your opportunity. And then what I'd love to do is when everyone has had a chance to review it, we can have a deeper discussion in a future meeting. John, one question I have just right off the bat is, does this require a recommendation by planning commission or just
No.
Consideration of the draft language?
Yeah, just information.
Okay. So what I'd love to do maybe is during this time period, find a meeting where we can actually have a deeper discussion with feedback for staff. But just any comments about this schedule?
I actually,
Go ahead, Opie.
I actually have one, John, and I guess it's related to Emily. So I don't understand our role in this from kind of the outline of the dates. This does eventually come in front of the Planning Commission for our recommendation for approval by the county council, or does it not? And if it
Yes.
does, when would that be?
That's a good point. It should actually, that should be plugged in there, and it's not. And that's one of the reasons we preempted this a bit with the task force and the project managers to make sure the Planning Commission was part of that advisory process, which you should be. So we will update the schedule to include you, Opie, because I know you're feeling left out.
Well, I didn't get the packet till today for some reason, but when I did, I looked at how long it was and I thought, "Man, this is like the general plan in terms of length and stuff." And I thought, well, I'm not going to review it today. So that's actually reassuring to know.
Yeah, just to give you a framework to this went to the Technical Advisory Committee, which is a subset. Emily's on that. I don't know if there's any other Planning Commission member. I think Emily's the only Planning Commission member. Last Friday. Who is?
Tony, you went to one of the events. Well, you went to the boat ramp one and.
Oh, yeah, I've been to a couple, well, the boat ramp public open house and the public open house for this transportation master plan. I was very happy to see all of the public input. John, I've never seen any version of any kind of transportation plan, even one order of magnitude less thorough than this one. Wow. 250 pages that's the Old Testament.
Yeah,
No.
but just to clarify, the Technical Advisory Committee is more of the formal reference group. The public's important, of course, public's number one, but that went to the Technical Advisory Committee in a meeting last Thursday, and it was open, hang on, I maybe got that wrong, the week before last, and it was open all last week. So that comment period closed for them on Friday. And we got a fair number of comments that move things around. I shouldn't say, they didn't move any of the projects around. They did bump the numbers a bit, but the project list stayed the same. So none of that's changed, although I think Kimberly Horn's still gathering data. So the project list you see should be the one that is coming forward to the next step. And the draft report that's there is pretty well, as Tony's kind of intimating, is pretty well ready to go. I think it's had a lot of public comment. It's had a lot of technical comment. The project managers have all been involved. Chuck Williams of the city, his team, Bill Jackson, and our planning team and his people too. So, and Kimberly Horn's done a pretty good job, I think, at getting this out to the public. So, and it's on their website. I don't think this is posted right now. It's on our Grand County Connects website. So the next big phases are to go to their city council, and then to our county commission, just to let them know as information. Then we will make sure, Bob, to plug in the Planning Commission as advisory for recommendation in this process.
Any other comments about the comment and adoption period? And so why don't we all plan to take a read through it. If we want to divide it or claim some sections, we can email and figure that out. And we can just, plan on having a discussion, more thorough discussion at a future meeting. Great. Any additional comments that anyone wants to provide?
Yes, what specifically would staff be looking for as we're looking through this?
I would say maybe if there's anything like major that got missed that should be in the plan, or
like a specific project. Okay.
Project specific.
Could we get a Word document version?
Possibly.
I missed the steering committee. Again, I've forgotten the name of all the various committees last Thursday. The only thing I'll call out, I don't think it needs any discussion, but I would love to maybe revisit this when we do go a bit deeper, is it does seem like there's a sort of lack of consideration of Spanish Valley Drive. in terms of bike paths and dedicated trails. I live in the southern end of the county, so on a personal note, that frustrates me. But I also will point out that that is the area where we're seeing our density now with these new projects, especially at the Spanish Trail area, Arroyo Crossing. That means families, that means children. And I won't let my kids bike near their home because Spanish Valley Drive is way too dangerous, especially with the lack of enforcement in the area. I really do think that needs a second look and dedicated look, because I was very surprised to see a lack of anything.
Yeah, actually, that whole corridor is actually identified as a project. It may be difficult to see, but
I was looking at the maps. I didn't
it's
see it.
listed. It's listed in the trails area as number 3, I think, or number 2. It's somewhere up there. And also, Emily, I think it's really important to recognize there's design standards around the trail design. There's some of them are cookie cutter, but yeah, you're right. Anything that goes along an arterial or major collector needs to really be well thought out. Also, there's hotspots funding for that whole trail construction, capital construction, and right away. So Chris Baird is working on that now too. So it's really got a priority for the county.
Well, and I know Chris is great about that. And I'll just end with, I've heard comments from a number of people in the community in passing that it really does feel like that southern part of the county, the Spanish Valley Drive area in particular, it just sort of gets discarded and has historically. And it is no longer just an agricultural, road to fields. It is a place where our family growth is happening and will continue to be. And I'm glad to see, I may have missed something, but would love that to be maybe something staff could just revisit and talk about when we meet.
And if I could just jump in there, one of the things that's missing here, I think, is that actually it's a secondary corridor and it's ad hoc for any stoppage that occurs on 191, because it becomes a secondary route. I don't know if this hasn't happened since I've been here, but anything that in hazmat, any hazardous material going down 191, and there's a lot that it could occur there. The alternate route really is Spanish Valley Drive, at least on the south end. So UDOT doesn't formally recognize it, but it becomes an informal secondary route, which really puts a lot of pressure in the residential area.
That's especially true now that we have that stoplight at Spanish Trail, and we haven't lived through a summer or a Memorial weekend with traffic stopping at that light on their way to, Rim Village. But then you get 1 or 2 RVs that are lost and looking for their left-hand turn, and people start turning off the road and looking to get to the Spanish Valley Drive to get home. So
I know
anecdotally, but
Angie from OSTA said there's a lot of traffic coming through OSTA.
really,
Yep, coming through there, which would make some sense, right? People are a little bit lost, and it's not, to me, a obvious route to get back in and out of the highway, but yeah,
Oh, yeah,
I know.
absolutely. Yeah,
I
you
know.
get behind the one guy and you're like,
right.
the-
We're all gonna, yeah,
where's
she
the-
said she's getting a lot of traffic. Right.
sorry.
I did see the Spanish Valley so the first thing I looked for actually when I found this in the email today, and I only skimmed it, but a couple things that I was looking for, but one was specifically multi-use bike path on Spanish Valley that's totally separate, because everybody wants that. I feel like from what I've heard, like there's so many people that are like, I want a safe way to go to Spanish Valley on my bike. I don't feel comfortable doing that on my bike right now. And I thought I saw it as like number 5 on the priority list when I scrolled through here, but maybe
No, it should be higher than that. I thought it was number 3, but
It's not number 3. I just saw it on the list.
But that's the
There's that.
roadway assessment. There's the actual trail, like the multi-use trail is number 5, I thought.
It's on there. I just saw it, but it's not
Which I
number
think
3.
was,
Yeah.
which I think was
Table
below,
22.
which I think was below King
Page
Creek even, which is kind of surprising to me.
So let's do this. Let's tentatively plan on at our next meeting, schedule and time for discussion. If everyone can commit to giving this a read through, if we want to divide it up, just call it out in email, we'll figure it out. But let's go ahead and move on for tonight and give ourselves a chance to read through it. But it sounds like something we specifically look staff to just come ready to discuss for sure. Okay. I'm going to move this on unless there's any pressing comments. Has anyone been waiting to weigh in? Okay.
Are we moving on from the timeline here?
From the transportation map. So I was going to move us on for the overall discussion onto our next agenda item. But if there's any other comments, feel free to weigh in. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, number 6, and then have a dedicated discussion about the transportation master plan tentatively at our next meeting.
As long as it includes the timeline, I feel good about that. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Great. So that'll move us on to item number 6, recent rezone requests and options for applicants to provide workforce housing or affordable fee in lieu.
Okay. Sorry, I don't have a staff report for this. It was just kind of a general discussion that we wanted to bring up and see if this was something we wanted to pursue as more formally, because we don't currently have anything that requires or incentivizes formally in our land use code for workforce housing yet, but we're working on that, right? So, but in the recent past, we've had several rezone requests, and so I guess staff is just kind of trying to get clarification from Planning Commission and we've been getting a lot of questions from applicants too in regard to this. So this is kind of where this is coming from. Whether or not the unfavorable recommendation for rezone request is really largely because of the fact that we're in this land use analysis, general plan phase, we're updating the land use map, and all of these changes are going to happen kind of comprehensively. And that was something that was cited as a reason to vote unfavorably for the rezone requests that were recently requested in Spanish Valley area, like on Spanish Valley Drive. There were a couple that were trying to go from rural residential to small lot residential. So we understand that there is that reason for not wanting to have a favorable recommendation. But there's also the possibility that applicants are kind of asking if they were hypothetically able to voluntarily provide a certain amount of those units in a future subdivision through a development agreement as deed restricted workforce or a fee in lieu for affordable housing, which we do have some calculations in our code right now in the PUD section that could, and also the assured housing section that could be translated to coming up with like a fee in lieu for affordable housing. And so some of the developers have been asking, would this make their application stronger? Would the Planning Commission potentially see that as kind of a deal maker instead of just kind of coming to a hard stop on these rezone requests?
So here's how I recommend we approach this. It sounds like there are 2 potential paths forward, which isn't, to me, there aren't other ways of looking at this. One is interest in looking at this issue specific to the general plan of land use coast update. The second is considering density bonuses in exchange for fee in lieu or dedicated housing, either tied to or not tied to the HDHO program itself. What I don't want to do is spin too far out into the weeds. So what I'd actually love is to do 2 straw polls on each of those after some discussion. But once we kind of feel like we've reached a point of discussion, we feel comfortable going through the straw poll, I'm going to go ahead and just move us forward. It's not a commitment. It's not a vote. You're welcome to abstain, but at least it can give staff direction. Does everyone feel comfortable with that approach, Tony?
Yeah, I had discussion, so I'm not gonna cut you off just yet until you're ready to begin that.
Okay, well, we'll come back to you first. But just generally speaking, is anyone opposed to a straw poll on those 2, just to give staff some direction? You're shaking your head no, you didn't want to do
I'm
it.
not opposed.
You're not opposed, okay. Anyone else?
Are you saying
Go ahead, Obi.
are you saying a straw poll before we discuss?
No, we'll discuss first. I just want to
Okay,
make sure we're all on the same page about how to approach this, because this could very
Yeah.
easily turn into,
right.
something that isn't productive for staff. And so I'm going to give it to Tony, but then Trish, it sounds like you would want to weigh in, and I think it would be really helpful. Did you start to speak? No. Well, I'm going to
Was
invite
I
you to
grumbling?
participate. in
Maybe I
this.
wasn't talking to myself.
Um,
I was frustrated already.
I am going to sort of facilitate this conversation, so I want to make sure everyone has a chance to weigh in, and then we'll go from there. So Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand staff's question fairly clearly, I think. And if my answer doesn't sound like it's on point, you can just ignore me then. But if we're wondering why basically zoning changes have been denied recently. Anytime that I've voted no on a zoning change has had multiple reasons for that declension. That's not a word. Non-favorable recommendation. For example, things are not just, the general plan is so close by, you can wait. It's been recently, the general plan is coming soon. There is no affordable housing, and development poses some sort of threat to a natural resource that we depend on, such as groundwater or forest products, fire threat, right? So if it was any one of those things, if any one negative impact could be mitigated by a commensurate positive impact in another region, becomes much less of a hard stop, as you put it, Alyssa. But when you've got proposals that say, I want this, I want to change the rules, and I don't want to wait just a little bit longer. And also, I'm not going to do anything to help my neighbors, and I'm going to potentially put everyone else's resource at risk. I mean, why on earth would we say yes to that?
Tony took my words away, probably. So I'm pretty much the same. There's been multiple reasons, and I can't remember all the times we've designed. Sometimes it's an up zone with not enough, since you can't do one of these up zones quid pro quo kind of thing. It's let me change the zoning and then I'll decide what to do, which is, of course, I don't feel very comfortable with. And so, but there's typically been multiple reasons.
I mean, to me, it wasn't even the last development. I mean, they were getting a fairly high, they were going to be able to squeeze in quite a bit, and they wanted more, right? So it was just, to go from rural residential to small lot, it's like not going from rural to large lot. They just want so much, and the amount, and I understand development has exploded, and it's been a while since I built the house. So, but to ask 300 grand for a fairly small lot, you're not at all looking at our community and providing for our community, right? There's no but way anybody in this community could afford that, or any just basic worker bee, which I am, which you are, right? Like, I just am almost fairly offended when they come to the table with that. Well, I am offended.
Sure.
So come to the table with something that you are going to try to provide for our community, instead of looking at what's down the street from me. They're trying to sell homes for 900 grand, right? We're going to cut up, you're going to get a 1/4 acre lot, and we're going to build on it, and you're going to pay almost $1 million for it. I mean, I just look at myself. I'm single, and I literally have, right now I have 4 jobs to try to afford a home in this community, right? So I'm just coming from what it takes to try to survive here and be able to have a home.
Tony, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to let everyone have a chance to weigh in.
Can you restate our prompt? My mind is going in so many different directions with this.
I'll try to keep it really simple. Is basically, we're getting asked by applicants if they came back with a proposal that voluntarily dedicated some of their, like a certain percentage of what the units they were getting approved for in a PUD use or a rezone potential units that they could develop. If they voluntarily were able to do that, and I do have a question out to Christina currently, and I haven't heard back yet to see if that's even doable via a development agreement for a rezone. But if that were theoretically allowed, and applicants wanted to voluntarily, just in the meantime, while people are impatient, they're wanting to like
Right.
bring these proposals forward, and we're still kind of telling them, well, we're in the middle of this process of updating our code for one thing that might affect development in terms of we're going to start maybe being able to require some of these things or provide better, clear incentives for affordable housing set-asides. But in the meantime, folks are asking, would it be worth it for us to come back with a proposal that was modified that included some kind of a set aside for deed restricted units or a fee in lieu for affordable housing, and kind of voluntarily did that? Would it matter, or would it still be kind of like the issues that Tony was discussing, like there's all these other reasons that are involved in your guys' decisions as well? Would those items still be kind of weigh heavily enough that it wouldn't make a difference?
My thought on it, I'm all for trying to find a way that we can hold developers to kind of their stated good intentions or encourage them more, incentivize them. So I like where that's going. I think that's great that you're already talking with the county attorney. So because I think we got to tread lightly, right? Because are we just in like an organized, predetermined quid pro quo?
Right,
Right.
I know that.
So that, I mean,
Yeah.
so I think that's great that we're getting consultation on that.
Yeah.
And then I think we're still going to be in the same position as what Tony was saying, where we're still weighing the pros and the cons. Yes, okay, well, we're going to do 30% local workforce housing. Great. That's a lot more enticing. It's probably going to make our decisions that much more agonizing and gut wrenching when it's like, oh, it's on the aquifer. Okay, that's going to be really conflicting, I think, for us,
Yeah.
but that's good.
Right.
So,
Right.
Right. There's
And
something to at least make us debate the decision.
and one thing I do want to throw out there, this is just my opinion. Let's not let the quest for perfect undermine some solution. I think that commonly can happen. And of course, there might be certain things like, yes, that's going to pollute our aquifer. Okay, well, that's not good. That's really bad. But just something to keep in mind, because I think that's so oftentimes.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
That's what I was finished.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry.
No worries.
So the last few that have come through, and I wasn't here for the one prior meeting. I didn't look at affordable housing anyhow, but the last year I've seen, they've come and said this is going to be affordable housing. And then when you start asking them, so what's the lot price? Well, that's not affordable housing. But then that goes back, so what is the definition of affordable housing and a lot price? And I don't think we're out here to set that, but and maybe the developers need to set that, but but that's my reaction out the bat. You say this is, you're doing us a favor, it's affordable housing, but it's not. So, I've already, built a wall up in front of myself because you're not in reality. So, but you're out there to make some money. And I'm not against that either. It's just, and then it goes, and that's not even getting to the resource thing too. I'd still like to have, I'm a numbers guy. So you want to put in 40 houses, how much water is that going to use? I'm sure the technical committee is probably looking at that. But that's, and so how does that affect the sewer plant downtown? I'm sure it's part of their application, but yeah, maybe we ought to get to look at that too occasionally.
So indicators or some sort of.
Yeah, and say before it comes up here, I guess it goes to the technical one next, but if they've done their homework and they have more numbers, maybe this is a hurdle they can get over easier. So that's just my work. So.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everybody's sentiment so far. I think I would agree with what Rick was saying. I think that's on us to do some research into like what affordable housing is, what that means for us, and some triggers for that as things rise and all this inflation happens. For me, it is a multitude of different factors. It's water, it's limited resources otherwise, it's density, you know, it is largely affordable housing. I think it certainly sweetens the deal. Like Rick said, if they've come and they've done their homework,
Right.
it's glaringly obvious to me how many developers have come before us and have not done their homework and are completely shooting from the hip. They're like, I want to make money, I'm going to build some houses. You know, like that's like, seems like the extent of their, or that I'm sure that's not it, but to me, it feels like there's a lot of other factors that are fairly obvious that you don't have to dig very hard to find. And so, what'd you say?
I said that was in the minutes from last week when I read it. Yeah, that's what the developer said. I don't care who builds it. I'm here to sell lots and make money. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Right, and we're a community that's pretty vocal about our issues, and it's not hidden what's happening really, you know, from people's perspectives. I don't think it's very hard to find that information as a developer. Yeah, so it's been the deal if they were deed restricting, but I think, yeah, having also not just saying those buzzwords, saying I'll have affordable housing, I'll have but actually showing like, this is what that looks like.
Yeah, something that was
So-
binding to them.
Right, and just like giving more of a clear idea and not just like beating around the bush of what the numbers are, so. That's fair. I'm also curious, but I don't want to get in the weeds, so I'm not gonna go too far, but that map idea we were talking about earlier of what developments are happening, I think that'd be a really helpful tool for us to have on hand.
Well,
Yeah, just like anytime we're looking at
Like future build out.
just in general, just to be like, oh,
Yeah.
all these hotels and these ADUs are going in here. These people want a higher density, but next door to them is going in this campground, you know, like all these things that
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
would just give a more holistic view of the
For sure.
valley. I would be in favor of having it on hand for just any time we're looking at something like that.
Yeah, so
So,
I love that.
I would recommend, Rick probably has it. I have an app called Onyx Hunt, and it's a hunt app. But I will tell you, it's petrifying because what it does is you can look at a parcel, any parcel, and look at who owns it. And I will tell you, this valley is just inundated by LLCs.
Oh,
And you
absolutely.
can click on the LLC and then you can pull it up, you know.
oh yeah, I mean,
Google
that's the
it,
plat map too.
yeah,
same thing.
It's, yeah, any plat map.
Yeah, yeah, but it's hard to
it's a
know
little-
what they're developing there. You know,
I
you're like, I
agree. Yeah,
know
you
you
don't
got
know.
something, but
Yeah, you just know
Right.
that it's owned by a large development
Yeah.
company that's from North Carolina, for example.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me weigh in my 2 cents, because I generally agree, and then Tony, I'll come back to you. Because I have a couple comments on this. So the first comment is the state of Utah, the state code gives us the legislative power to govern the parcels in our community. And, you know, it's so interesting having an applicant here, because I love the question that comes down to private rights versus public good. If you have chosen to buy land in Grand County and that land is rural residential, you have the right to build a house at 1 house per 5 acres. Nobody can take that away from you. But you don't have a right to build at a higher density. Your neighbors have a right to say that is not the character of this area. We don't think that that is the way that we should be planning for our future in this community. And that is the balance. And that is given to us by the state of Utah. So it's not about taking away private property rights or anything. You choose to buy what you choose to buy. Your economic ability gives you, you know, some range of what you can buy. And, you know, anything else is asking the community to give you what is collectively available. So I'll just start there, that on principle, you know, I think Steve made this point, no matter what somebody comes to the table with, we have the legislative right to say that does not fit the characteristics, the planning, development goals, the, you know, community, surrounding community of that plat. And I'm never going to talk about anything that's black or white, you know, it's always gray. Second thing is we do have policies that the county has adopted to trade density bonuses in exchange for required community benefits in the form of you know, fee in lieu through assured housing and through you know, density bonuses, and you give 80% for workforce housing. We have those policies. I don't see why we need to creatively look for other ways to go about this. The county has spent a lot of time, a lot of citizen input on these issues. And if the county thinks that we want to find creative ways to increase density, we have those at our advantage. We also have ADUs. And one of the things about ADUs compared to large scale development is large scale development, may ultimately have benefits to the community in the forms of more homes being built. But ultimately, it really concentrates the benefit, the economic benefit of that trade-off against the community value you're giving up in form of density. ADUs, on the other hand, can lead to more dispersed density that actually can benefit the bottom line of homeowners in our county who are seeing their property taxes going up, the cost of living going up. You can actually benefit the families and the individuals who already live here while creating creative ways to create additional homes and also more likely to be renters. Whereas what we've seen with a lot of these applications are single family homes, which is not where we have the need in terms of housing. If you look at the data, and this is a little bit dated, but the National Group of Government, I can never remember names, governments, what is that called? The National Government. You know what I'm talking about. Small governments, National Group of Small Governments. Oh, it doesn't matter. Anyway, it's, they collected data, and if you look at Grand County compared to the national average, our mortgages as a percentage of disposable income is actually kind of in the middle of county, especially when you look at places like Park City and other comparables. It's the rental income where you really see us hitting the top line in terms of the amount of disposable income that goes towards rentals. So building more single family homes is not ultimately where the pain is at large. And we have a lot of houses in the pipeline already that will continue to come online in the coming years. I think the last thing I'll say on this is there is an economic principle of YIMBYism. You build more, you can drive down the cost of housing. It's why we looked at a free market solution for the high density housing overlay. We said, let's create a market for residents, workforce members, and allow them to barter on the open market, but let's restrict the market to people whose incomes are what govern your availability to purchase. That's what makes our situation very distinct from a place like Salt Lake City or Phoenix or Denver. In Salt Lake or Phoenix, they have constraints of water and so on, but they have a lot of land you can build on. And generally speaking, the people who are living there, on the whole, maybe until recently, tend to be the ones buying homes. That's not the case here. If 80 homes come online, there are 80 people living outside of our community who are hungry to buy those homes. Whether they want to have them as a second home or an investment property or come and live here, they are not people who are currently here on the whole. And we are not going to be able to build our way out of this problem just by increasing the number of single family homes on the market. We have to look at ways to ensure that the people competing to be in the market are the people who are here, working here, kids in the school, and to make sure that there are some ways of balancing that against the real income need. So all of that to be said, rather than offer additional solutions, I would like to see the county, maybe a discussion with the county commission, decide whether or not they're open to expanding HDHO or at what time, what indicator that would be. Maybe we look at assured housing and we consider that for large scale residential developments. But beyond that, I don't think that we need to find solutions for, I don't need to put developers in one category, but just low D developer. I don't think we need to find solutions that cater to those applicants. I would rather see us look for solutions that actually spread the economic benefit while actually creating solutions where it's most needed. That's my soapbox. So I'll stop talking. Tony, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, Emily. I left the substantial comment in the chat so I wouldn't forget it. But in short, to answer Alyssa's question, you want to know if affordable housing matters to us when considering the impacts, the negative impacts that project proponent might have during a rezone change. Man, if Bruce Wayne wanted to build 1,000 units and donate them to people, I mean, he could have the arena, he could have Arches National Park for all I care. But it's not like a yes, no, green light, red light thing. It's scaled and it's a spectrum. The more negative impacts that are associated with a proposal are going to have to see commensurate benefits to the affordable housing situation in all the ways Emily just outlined, right? It's not, oh, I can build 45 units right now. I want to build 9 more. Those 9 can be affordable. Let me do it on top of your groundwater recharge area. That's, they need to be commensurate. I don't know how to measure that, I'm not that smart, but it's a spectral thing. It goes back and forth.
And,
Obi?
and the only last thing I wanted to say, which is absolutely, it's a kind of balance thing. I don't know that I was very articulate in the last meeting, but I noticed Elisa is taking notes. One of the things I would have liked to have seen in that application, although I wouldn't have probably approved it anyway, was the assumption in the figures that you could take the minimum amount that's required, that is 50% reduction. You could take the minimum and you don't have to justify, well, you took the minimum. And it just seemed to be a weakness of the proposal, given that you're building on the watershed, you're not doing a watershed study, you're not figuring out if there's some roots to our Glen Canyon aquifer down there. And you're saying, well, I'm sure that the minimum is just plenty for protecting the area. So it would be one thing they could correct in that proposal, although I think there'd have to be maybe other things also. Thank you.
And part of the thing, before I forget, question number 1 in that questionnaire is, was this zoning made in error? If you want us to change the zone and admit that there wasn't an error made, you're going to be on your heels. I love that question. It tells me right away whether or not this thing is entirely valid or we're going to have to make some compromises right off the bat. Did we make a mistake previously? No, we didn't. Okay, explain yourself.
I'm going to hit pause in discussion for a moment. I don't know that we need a straw poll. I'm going to ask, do you have direction generally to move forward?
I do.
Yes. Okay. Just getting the feel for the
Yes,
sentiment.
no, it's very good. Thank you.
Is there anything else that would be helpful for you to hear from us as far as discussion
Oh,
with county
you're-
commission?
Yeah, you guys are great.
I don't want to
You're
just.
all way more articulate than I am. I get super upset.
That's why we're here. Recommending. I don't want to leave anybody on the floor if there were things they wanted to say, but I'm just going to kind of give everyone one last opportunity for final words. If there's nothing else, we're going to go ahead and move on to our second citizens to be heard. Okay. All right. Thank you for bringing that. It's 6 o'clock. It's 5:30. We always do it at 5:30. I thought we did it at 6. Well, whatever.
Yeah, we can change it.
I-
That's just an hour, that's an hour into the meeting, so. I don't
Yeah.
think that makes sense.
Okay, well, my mistake. It's 6 o'clock. I'm 30 minutes late to call for our second citizens to be heard. We still do have 2 members of the public here. If you'd like to make a comment, or if you're watching on YouTube and you want to join, this is your opportunity. I'll give you a chance to say yes or no, and then we're going to go ahead and move on. Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on. Land use, no, that's one we just did. No,
So
it's
the
not. Land use code
Land use code
updates status.
This just really should be under like future considerations. Just wanted to check in with you guys because I didn't have, what I wanted to have by this meeting was a draft temporary use section for you to review, but I didn't get that ready in time for this meeting. So that is underway, and it includes the criteria for film production. These are all temporary uses that are not in the code right now. So we're going to be adding film production as a category, flea markets, food trucks, retail pop-ups, recurring concert series or other entertainment type of series, like where they're occurring, starting and stopping within the same year in the same place, like maybe like a little film screening, movie night somewhere. These are all things that we don't really, some categories are pertinent to what's going on in the county right now, but some of them may be way into the future. We're not experiencing stuff like this as much in the county as the city is. But I think as long as we're updating the temporary use section, we might as well include things that are kind of standard across jurisdictions like us. So so that's underway, and I've met with all the folks at the Travel Council and Vega from the Film Commission to get all the input that she has for the film production stuff. And so that's really developed nicely. We have some input from Rachel as far as kind of differentiating between temporary uses and what a special event permit is. And I'm also getting feedback from the attorney on that. And then the other part of the temporary use section that would be a big thing is including in that the temporary dwelling permit that we discussed. And so that would be fleshed out in the draft that I'll bring to you guys at the next meeting. And then the ADU section, as I've already stated in the past, that is with Christina for her review. And I haven't gotten feedback on that yet, so it's just kind of there. But I'm really hoping that this can, all of these updates, they're in the same article, Article 3. And so I'm hoping that this will just be one code amendment with I've already drafted an ordinance that would include the ADU section as well as the temporary use section all in one clean code amendment. So that's kind of what I'm shooting for. And then I would also be shooting for bringing that to the June 13th Planning Commission meeting as a public hearing, and then also then the June 21st County Commission as a public hearing, if you guys are good with that.
For the ADU section, a month ago at our meeting, we had briefly talked about the potential of mobile units as ADUs. We decided maybe that wasn't the right direction. Seeing other communities adopt that, I actually would love to at least get legal review on that. And I had a thought that, you know, in being a recommending body, obviously we want to bring forward our best version to public hearings, but I also thought, well, why self-edit that? Why don't we leave that in and allow for the community to weigh in and then determine its appropriateness after public hearing? So on a personal note, I actually would like to see that included in the draft language. That's one opinion. And the idea there would be, there are examples in other resort communities that have been popping up where they take the trailer, like, you know, the nicer kind of tiny home trailers, but rather than requiring that they be off of their wheels, the wheels would still be there, but they would be essentially operating as a permanent structure. But it can be a more affordable way of getting that type of use onto the property. So I see a lot of reasons why it also might not be a feasible or a good decision, but I would love to get community input on that.
Is that where we were going with the temporary use permit though?
We sort of covered a bit of ground. Yeah.
I think
I'm
the
sorry.
temporary dwelling permit was more going to be geared towards those properties like the NAVTech property and those where we have the illegal camping happening, but we want to be able to bring that up to a standard that's good with health and safety and sanitation.
I do think it can be in the middle though, because like in Castle Valley, it sounds like what Orion pointed out is they do that. And, you know, whereas you would need to have a permanent dwelling for it to be coded under the business code, if it could be permitted via the health department, but still have the same use as an ADU. It's just an alternate means of legitimizing that use and ensuring that it meets effective standards. So like I said, I'm not saying that I just would like to have some comment from the public.
I would love to see that too.
Any other discussion related to the land use code updates status? That's separate from the alternative dwelling discussion and brainstorm that we're going to come back to.
Yeah, can I just a general land use code update question?
Right.
Where are we at with the glamping regulations?
With the OAO stuff for OAO, that would have been for section 4.6 for the OAO district campgrounds. We have currently campground RV, but then we were going to add a section or a category for like special purpose retreat was kind of what we were pointing it, and that would encompass glamping.
Right. Where are we at?
That is pushed back on back burner for now because we wanted to get these the ADU section, the housing stuff kind of
it's much more pressing.
became the priority. So
cool. I just hadn't heard about it for a while, so I was like, I'm gonna with that. So
yeah,
cool.
It's still on the docket for dealing with it for sure.
Great. Thank you.
So we'll move on, and in the spirit of trying to keep these meetings to 2 hours or so, for this last discussion, I am going to try and shut us down after about 20 minutes.
Sure.
I actually have some comments I'd love to introduce at the top after watching YouTube, but I'd love to start first by seeing where you are, what you need from staff's perspective.
Right.
Go from there.
So you and Steve have sent me some great examples of tiny home community ideas that are taking off in various places like Aspen and Boise have great examples where they're trying out allowing tiny home communities. And they're also actually subsidizing in some cases. I think it's Aspen that was doing that, where they actually bought a campground and but they have the money to do that. So we might be in a different situation here. So there's a lot of momentum. I think we can provide examples when we do get more of a draft together to propose to the community and to the commission, where we can provide visuals and examples where tiny homes and even alternative style dwellings, like kind of what Seth was talking about from ORS, like, allowing people to live out of their van or whatever for a certain amount of time. And so I'm working on compiling these examples and bringing them, getting them into a presentation form. The one thing that's also keeps coming up in my mind that I would like to hear from you all on is whether or not we should be going in the direction of creating like an eligibility map, like we did with the HGHO, where we identify some parcels that we think are good, appropriate, like this would be a good fit for these like select few parcels, maybe not few, but maybe more than that, several parcels, and that would be sort of the pilot kind of version of this. And or do we go with like the wide open OAO style, which the OAO districts are available for anybody to apply in any zone, and then the commission ultimately uses their discretionary power to say we think it's a good fit or not. But that kind of leaves it really open, and that in some sense that could be good for sort of the free market idea of like where these might pop up naturally, but then there would be a lot more criteria that we probably want to put into those standards that would mitigate any impacts.
Is it possible to pursue both? Like, because you're talking about the county parcels, as in like parcels owned by the county.
No, I'm talking about private property.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So
but you're talking
opening-
about private property as far as like identifying ideal parcels.
Yes,
that are
opening it
private.
up to, yeah, exactly. So the HGHO eligibility map, it identified, all these different parcels at different levels of density that were kind of like for 6 months or however, was it a year that it was open for application for the HGHO? I can't remember. It was,
So long
I
ago.
think it was about a year.
Like, I wasn't around.
And there was that sunset date and all of that. So
But that was based more on being on major arteries, right? As far as
yeah,
those overlays were,
the criteria will be
Yeah,
different for
right.
this type of
Right.
an idea.
But-
But where it's appropriate, those things would have to be considered differently than HGHO, but.
right.
So let me weigh in on this, and it kind of abuts my comments, which unfortunately I sort of probably should have put into the last section. So, but I'll just kind of start at the lead. The reason why there's urgency behind this issue is there are currently members of our community, members of our workforce community and families with kids in schools who are displaced or at risk of being displaced because we don't legitimize mobile or alternative, semi-permanent alternative dwellings, except in very specific circumstances. To me, that is the most important thing to solve. I heard in the discussion from last week, it's great to hear the discussion, but I also want to make sure that we don't overshoot the urgency to try and develop a longer term policy and miss the opportunity to solve the most immediate pain. So that's one thing I just wanted to raise. Like, there are people living in their cars in our community It makes it difficult to enforce other illegal dwelling uses, mobile dwelling uses, and it means it's difficult for us to identify the community, help them, and make sure that they're safe and that they're provided for. To me, like, that is the thing to solve for first. In some of the discussion, there was questions about incentivization, and, you know, could we tie it to some sort of nightly rental use? And I don't know, maybe there is some future version of this, but I think that is far beyond where we need to be right now in the discussion. Only not to shut that down as a possibility, but just to say, it just makes it so much more complicated than it needs to be to
right.
solve for the immediate pain point.
Yeah.
Your time's of the essence right now.
Time is of the essence.
Yeah.
I think, you know, some of the things that we've been hearing, so it's interesting hearing from staff, he's a manager of a river company. We obviously know that Navtech is another example where this use is being played. I know that's not the only companies taking advantage. So here's some of the things we're hearing. First is there is no set number of people requiring this use, that it may vary over time. And that without some way of legitimizing it, either people will just be operating outside of county code, and we need to just accept that that will happen. Or these businesses will struggle to operate, right? We know that. Number two, saying requirements of like, oh, you have to be there for 90 days. There are some families who are displaced for a month. There are, you know, employees who come down to work for a week and then they go down to Grand Canyon and then they go up to Vernal and then they come back here because people seek work in the service industry in particular. So what I would like to see is some way of enabling, and let's start with employers, just as we know that's where there is an existing need, some way for employers to petition the county to allow for a set number of units or a set number of residents across different uses, maybe at a density of what you would see with a tiny home community as already permitted under our code. You know, like we already know how many tiny homes can be on an acre. Consult with the health department in terms of required number of bathroom units. But we, you know, like, let's just use what exists. And I think, you know, there, we already heard from the health department that doing annual permits is not beyond their, what they can handle. You know, maybe we say 6-month visits for the first year, but I think we can find a really feasible solution to solve the immediate pain. So I just wanted to start with that. I love the fact that we're talking about composting toilets. I love the fact that that's starting to make its way into our code because I think it'll have bigger benefits. I also will come back to the fact that I think that there could be something to permitted vehicles where, you know, you say to an employer, you know, the vehicles have to have some, a 8x11 piece of paper, you know, taped to the back of the car that says, you know, this is the permit number. You could make it something the employer hands you when you come into the lot for the weekend. Throw it in your back window. When you head out to the Grand Canyon, you give it back to the river guide company, and they, you know, like there are ways I think that we can do this, but I want to put it on put the burden of control on the employers, permit through the employers, maintain health standards and usage through the employers. Like, so I realize that's not what you were asking, Lisa. I meant to introduce that.
Well, is that an option to do something like that? And I'm just trying to grasp to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying of it being potentially a temporary thing and not committing to it for long term.
Yes.
To be like, this is what we're doing for now, to just get some freaking people a place to stay.
Yeah.
And then while that's happening, I'm assuming that's what you're saying.
Do a
we'll keep
2-year
working on a
program,
more,
and we will know who those folks are.
Great.
And we'll be able to track usage and we'll be
Great.
far more
So
informed.
And that's what
tools.
that's what the temporary dwelling permit would do.
Yeah.
The overlay idea would be like the secondary thing that would be kind of something more where we would require a step above just having porta potties or hauling in water and storing water.
Yeah.
But this would be more of like requiring like an actual developing like a real campground type situation where there's hookups and that kind of thing.
Right. And the only last comment I wanted to make related to that is I think by focusing on the immediate pain, we can get a better understanding of the types of usage and the sort of components of that use. Before we start talking about location, I think we need to define what this could be.
Okay.
And I would like to get public input on, you know, is there interest in this? What is the need? Who are the user groups? What are we blind to?
Right.
What are the concerns from the community we need to consider, and then start talking about maps? Because with HDHO, we started with maps and it became a huge issue. And then at the end of it, the places where we saw the most concern weren't even touched by it. And I think it was a misadjustment in how we approached it from a politics perspective in terms of engaging the community where they're at and actually having a discussion. But ultimately, I think it missed the bigger issue, which is what if all these applicants are these large scale developments versus small scale developments?
Yeah.
How do we handle that impact? And so on. So
Sure, yeah.
so
phase it
forgive me
out?
as I went through my list of notes from the YouTube recording,
okay.
but I don't want to shut down discussion. I just don't know if that's where we need to be right now.
Could we set up just a phase plan for this and be like, we're doing temporary dwellings right now, and AU is set aside for the moment, and just like really hunker down for that. And then once that's gotten wheels turning, we can pivot and move on to the next phase.
And go and talk to the employers.
I would,
Yeah,
I think I
It's
like
like right
that.
now we're like juggling. both
Right
of
now,
the-
I've been kind of simultaneously
Yeah.
trying to keep the discussion going on the alternative dwelling overlay idea. Because I was getting the urgency from the commission, like when a lot of the issues were coming up about, and it was like, well, can't we just take, it wouldn't be that hard to take the draft language from the OAO and just make it long-term camping. But like, it's so much more complicated than that. And so I think, but by breaking it down into this kind of more simple version of the temporary dwelling permit, like that kind of, it addresses the immediate need. And then we can talk about this other thing.
Let's just get our folks
Yeah,
into a legitimate situation where we know where they are, and we can make sure that they're safe, and we can just remove that fear that I'm going to lose my home.
Right. Absolutely.
can we, go ahead.
And Elise, I don't want to disregard this idea of like saying, well, we don't have enough money. I mean, right now we're talking about possibly disposing of a couple
Right.
parcels in San Juan
Okay,
County.
right,
So one, do we not dispose of those parcels and possibly consider or dispose of one of them and take the proceeds from that and build infrastructure of do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
let's just keep that. I mean, to me, it's an
I think
idea
that's
of like,
great.
we have a 40-acre parcel we're possibly disposing of, but do we take the money from that and put the infrastructure in on that 20-acre parcel?
Right.
To me, it's right on Spanish Valley Drive. It's in basically a commercial zone.
Yeah.
San Juan Health Clinic's right next to it.
Yeah.
To me, it really fits that bill. So I don't know, just let's not disregard the idea that the county does have the funds if we appropriate them from the sale of another parcel.
Yeah, I think that'd be awesome.
This big pie in the sky ideas, but really close, we're in that realm, so.
Before I come back to you, I want to make sure if anyone else has, I've sort of dominated the conversation. Any other comments, Steve, OB, Tony, and then we'll come back to Makeda.
Why don't we have a public hearing about this at our next meeting? You say is that the right venue is a public hearing the right kind of thing to like solicit feedback from the kind of people who would take advantage of this program? I'm not thinking about just employers seeking staff housing, but also the staff who would live there. We've already heard from Seth. I'm glad to see he came there. His situation is very typical of a seasonal employer in this town. Trish, I really like what you said about those lots down there by the San Juan Health Clinic. It boggles my mind that in such a real estate restricted environment as ours, we would be considering getting rid of any parcels. But that no one asked me. Just
I mean,
yeah.
selling those parcels. I mean, there's some, you know what I mean? It's been quite a discussion.
Yeah, that's what Arizona did to their trust land decades ago.
In terms of a public hearing, the only thing I would recommend is given the uncertain schedules of this user group, we might instead want to aim for 2 or 3 town halls and
That's a
open them
great
to the
idea.
public and notice them and use their
That's a
social
great
media.
idea.
And that way we can be flexible.
That's a
But I
great
think
idea.
you're absolutely right, Tony. Let's get folks talking to
Yes.
us. Let's stop kind of talking amongst ourselves. I think that's the right call.
That's a great idea.
There is a comment, oh my eyes. Can we define the term bathhouse in the draft code? Moab has an opportunity to provide an example for other tourist towns in the country having similar issues. Two notes on this. One, Kaya Marienfeld, I saw her the other day. She said the city is really, the planning commission is interested in engaging. We've talked about having another workshop. Let's engage them on this issue and see if we can have a workshop soon. Can you staff take that? Okay.
For sure.
And then bathhouse, that's not, is that currently in our code or is that?
No, this was
Okay.
just the draft code that was kind of off the cuff ideas of putting in everything that we could think of. And so the bathhouse was the idea of like an actual bathroom sink that would be hooked up to sewer and water. And that was for this future idea of an overlay for long-term camping.
Right, and that's taken off of like RV park.
Right, and that was, the bathhouse would
Requirements.
be required if there were sites that were not hooked up to sewer and water. So.
Oh, I just wanted to ask if, I'm just curious about the potential for having this be. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of, like, with the public engagement and everything, like having this be a more formal process, not the word I'm looking for. Basically, phases. Okay, phase one, we're looking to get this temporary dwelling thing like through with input and all this stuff. Having a deadline, we're trying to have some sort of progress by blank, and then following up with, I don't know. I guess I
So
don't
the
know from
town
your
hall
side
idea,
how that
I
works,
think
but-
the town hall idea would be good going forward for the second stage. I think right now, we were already, well, this is what I had just proposed, and then maybe this is going too fast, but to bring the temporary use section draft red line version to a planning commission public hearing on June 13th.
Love it.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah,
That
sorry,
would
it's
include
so much.
That's okay, it's a lot.
No, that's great.
It's a lot.
No, that's great. I love that. Yeah.
Are you comfortable doing that in Google Docs so we could be writing
Yes.
in?
For sure.
And that way, because
I
I
would
would
love
love to
that.
move this forward as fast as
Yeah.
possible. That phase one.
If we
Yeah.
can do
Yeah.
that, I would much prefer that than having to come here again and talk and then come
Yeah.
back with that public hearing.
Let's engage Lauren to start talking to the user groups now, if possible. Lauren.
Or Vista.
Yes.
Yeah, we have, she's not with us right currently, but
Let's
Yeah.
somehow
yeah, we can
engage
start.
these groups. I know there are people who are here from the public and who are listening in who have, been active in various guide and service groups. Like, let's make an attempt to engage them. Let's get them to this public hearing. Let's make sure that the people in the most need are taken care of, and then.
Yeah.
Okay. Any comment? Anyone have additions, disagreements, or issues with that approach? I just want to say thank you to staff, because I know you've just been, with everything else going on, passing our general plan, that's transportation plan. The fact that we've been able to move this
Oh, God,
forward
yeah.
with haste and urgency, I
Yeah.
just really thank you.
And that you're trying to juggle both of them too. is
Yeah.
Yeah,
crazy,
it's, we're moving things along, so
Yeah.
appreciate you all.
Lisa, is there anything that we can do to support just this first phase, especially kind of like the emergency measures to?
I've gotten everything that Orion has provided me a lot of what we need for those basic standards that he requires, and when he does inspections on the temporary dwelling permitted places out in Castle Valley. So I think I'm good. I think it's just a matter of having a few days of uninterrupted, time to write.
No one emails Lisa.
No emails.
I know
Unless you're
what
saying good job.
I did see, and I wish I knew where I saw this, but there was a community who, and it might have been a large city, I can't remember, who said, look, housing is an emergency, it's a crisis. When we have a wildfire, we call it a crisis. We go approach it differently than if it's just forest management. When we have a hurricane, we call it a crisis. We get our crisis team on it. This is a crisis. I love the urgency. I love the creative thinking. And I think, whatever we can do for this 2-year period, I'm losing my voice, I'm so excited. Whatever we can do to get this passed as fast as possible. I love it.
Yeah, I think basically as long as I can send you guys a Google Docs version of this and we can kind of be going back and forth on it, that would be helpful.
On my throat.
Except for you bringing this to the county commission to get this kind of interim phase.
So they would go to the county commission after, on June 21st would be the public hearing for the county commission. And that would include the updates under Article 3 ADU section and the temporary use section.
It is 6:28, so let's wrap up discussion. Any remaining comments anyone wanted to make? I just want to make sure I'm not leaving anyone on the ground. Do not want random overnight. This is a comment from the public in the chat, just suggesting they do not want random overnight rental customers showing up to the guide camp property. They deal with the tourists every day. Please don't have them show up to where we live. We don't want that anymore than anyone else. I actually, that's something I was concerned about.
Yeah,
I wasn't recording.
we've taken that off.
Let people have respite from work.
Yeah.
But I'm glad cool. All right. Any remaining comments?
I'm just wondering, how are you feeling, Erin? Are you like, what in the holy?
No, there's a lot to, catch up on, but I'm familiar with like the master plan
Yeah.
and stuff, and like, I mean,
Are you feeling
I used to
okay?
live out on King Creek in Ahoga. I've lived in numerous sheds. I've lived out of my car. Like, oh, I've got some, I mean, I may or may not have put in clean outs so somebody could put an RV dump for business owners around here.
Yeah.
Like, there's things that, like a couple of $1,000 you could have like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, somebody can park in my driveway. If you
Yeah.
wanna, like, have it,
Yeah.
but
Cool, that's good.
that's my part.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and any final thoughts, future considerations?
Yeah, just a really quick thing that we talked about just like in the name of public engagement and engaging various ages of community members. Is there anything in movement with getting like an Instagram or any kind of account up and running for the
I keep wanting
county?
to do that.
I'm happy to help if you
I'm
need
gonna put
anything.
it on my
but-
list again. It won't be hard. I just.
You have a
But
volunteer.
yeah, you have a volunteer.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, we just need to get it set up so that we can log in and have access, so yeah, if that's
Something I
possible.
can help
Sure.
set up and stuff. Okay,
Yeah.
great, cool. I'll tell you about it.
Yeah, and then you can add all your network people.
Insta the gram. All right. Any final thoughts, future considerations? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Rick has a motion to adjourn, seconded by Steve. All in favor. Thank you, everyone, for the great discussion. Have a great evening. Bye.